Okay, so the next session that we'll be having this afternoon is the rules of handicapping. There have been some changes on the way, and I'm really pleased to welcome Gemma from the RNA, who's going to be joining us for this next session and leading us through it. So lots of exciting information. Over to you, Gemma.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for having me and for obviously taking the time out to get involved a little bit with handicapping. What I would like to say is I'm not afraid of any questions, so please feel free to ask them. Don't think that you can't ask questions. That's the whole point. We all learn from asking questions, so please feel free to do so as we go through the presentation. We have got quite a lot to cover, and we've only got an hour and a half, and knowing how quick and how fast Zoe is at making sure we run to time, that we've got a bit of time to catch up. I've got to be on the minutes with this. So there is bits of it that I'll run through that really are massive changes. Where we have got important changes, I'll stop and make sure everybody understands where we are. Just be aware that during the course of the presentation, there's a lot of statistics and figures, formulas. I'm not expecting people to fully understand and know what they all mean. They're in the presentation so that you get an understanding, so that when you get questions from golfers at your club, you can have a better way of answering the question and feel confident in giving them the answer. So we'll work through it, and like I said, we'll pick things up as we go. As Zoe said, I'm from the RNA. I'm a handicap and course rating manager, and I've been with the RNA for just over 12 months. But I have actually got 10 years experience in handicapping. I was previously the head of handicapping and course rating at England Golf and oversaw the transition from Kongu into WHS. So it's not a new subject for me. It's something that I've been part of for the last 11 years. It's certainly an interesting topic. So just to highlight again, these are what we're going to briefly cover in today's session in terms of the principal changes. And again, not all of these are major changes. Some of them are just process things that we can add to. Anywhere you see this logo, that is sort of like the new change and something just to flag up when we get to a slide. So the first one we want to look at is formats of play. Now you look at this and you go, well, we do that anyway, and that's true. These are the formats of play that are going to be in the rules of handicapping are now mandatory for every country around the world. So prior to 2020, in 2020, it was basically only organised competition and general play scores in medal that were mandatory for everybody. Everybody else had the option to pick and choose the others. But now we've gone to any individual stroke play format, irrelevant of what format it is, competition or general play, across both 9 and 18 holes. So a slight change that we've made, but it's the idea about trying to get more scores into the system for more people all around the world. The next one leading on from that is pre-registration. Again, something that we all do anyway within GB&I, and certainly I know you guys do it here in Wales. But just to reiterate that players are required to pre-register their intent if they are wanting to submit a general play score for handicap purposes. Now, the easiest way for players to do that now is through the Wales Golf app, and they can obviously do that and confirm their score intent. However, players can also submit in a different way if you as a committee ask them to do so. So, for example, if you want them to sign in the pro shop and sign a book, that's fine. If you want them to do it on a terminal within your golf club, that's fine. Just tell the player. Just make sure that the players are fully aware of what their requirements are when they pre-register. They need to pre-register before the start of the round. Again, that's not changed. But what we're saying is players can't pre-register halfway through. They can't pre-register when they come in. So obviously there's a lot of safeguards within the app that will prevent that.
I'll give you an example. 3 weeks ago, rocked up on the first tee with 3 other players. I said, I'd like to put a card in today, if you don't mind. Are you all in agreement? Yes. And then at the end of that, we all signed the card, put the card in.
Yeah.
Happy?
Well, it depends what your club's said is the required format. If the club have said you've got to sign a book in the pro shop, that's what you've got to do. It's not between players to decide if you're playing at your home club. You have to follow the procedure that's been laid out by the golf club or via the app, because the person in the pro shop or the app doesn't know at what point you agreed to put that, you made that agreement between the players. Did you do it on the first tee? Did you do it on the 9th? Did you do it on the 18th? We don't know. We talked with talked about the legal stuff before about the process and the procedure. It comes down to that. And that's what it comes into the manner prescribed by the committee. If your committee at the club say, yeah, that's fine, if your playing partners all agree, that's okay. But I wouldn't suggest that would be a normal practice, because you want some form of record that that's been done before they've gone out to play. Just make it as easy as possible. Don't overcomplicate it wherever we can. This is the new bit. The bit in bold at the bottom there is the new bit. Players can only consider to be a player can be considered to have pre-registered their intent to submit a score if playing in a regular organised event with other players. So your Tuesday morning roll-up where 10 guys or 8 guys rock up and they all pay their £1, or they play for their bacon sandwich and they all mark their scorecard and they all play to the rules of golf and they all come in and they hand the cards to Bob and he checks them all off and they announce the winner and he pays for the bacon sarnies. That's the competition. The scores for those 8 players goes in the system. And if the players themselves haven't pre-registered to put those in, you as a club take the scores and put them in. It's a competition. They should be going in a player's handicap record. Okay? So it's just to reiterate that is you are able to do that.
Can I just ask, if that was saying you can do that, and suddenly say this group said, oh, I'm not putting my card in today, they've got no choice?
They haven't got a choice.
Okay.
They haven't got a choice. And you can't just do... You can't, exactly.
Either everybody puts the card in or
that's exactly what I was going to say. You can't go, well, we'll let you put yours in, but we're not going to put yours in. No. You either put one of them in, or none of them, or all of them.
So, discipline. Could a discipline code be used in that case?
So yeah, if for example that player, if somebody said, I'm not putting my score in, the committee can put it in as a penalty score. Yeah. So there's lots of ways you can do it. Again, with pre-registration, again, this is a new clarification around the fact that we've seen a lot of players who will register their intent for an 18-hole round, get to the 9th, decide that they don't want to play the back 9, and then try and put a 9-hole score in because they've played 9 holes. You can't do that. If you've pre-registered to play 18 holes, you have to play at least 10, which is the minimum number for 18 holes, for that round to go into your record. If you only play 9, it doesn't go in, it just gets discarded. The same the other way around. If you record an 9-hole pre-registration, and you go out, the 9-hole goes in. If you then play 10, 11, 12, you can't then add them and put an 18-hole score in. You would have to have pre-registered another 9 and for the back 9. So it's just confirming that pre-registration has to take place in the right order in terms of they can only submit 9 or 18 holes. The final one, obviously, I've gone slightly out of order, but if obviously were the minimum number of holes completed is the first question, and then was the failure to not complete the round valid, and that'll decide whether or not you accept the score. We're going to come back onto valid and invalid a little bit later on, so we'll pick that up again. When to submit a score? Just to highlight here that there is no distinction in the handicapping system between general play and competition. No score takes priority over any other. It's just a score. It's just a score for handicap purposes, irrelevant of the format. So we don't do anything differently for those 2 scores. There is no limit on the Has
an English golf changed the rule though? Because for like elite level,
they have a term. They have a term of competition for their events. I'll come back to that in a second if I can. There's no limit on the number of general play scores that a player can return at any level. You might have members in your golf club that can't play in competitions for work reasons or whatever, that might not be able to play competition golf. So general play is where they maintain their handicap. You might have players that don't like general play and only play in competitions. That's fine. That's the way our golfing culture has always been, competition driven. Unfortunately, it's not the same everywhere in the world. So again, to be a global system, we have to start adapting a little bit. Other countries are getting used to having to run competitions now. The USGA are now running more competitions at club level than they've ever run, because they've gone, actually, we've been missing out on something here for a long time, because they used to just run club events, which weren't actually competitions. They were more like roll-ups. I said we have got other safeguards in place to manage concerns around the number of general play scores. What I would say around the England Golf term of competition, and any term of competition that restricts players' ability to enter based on the number of general play scores in their record, is that it goes against the spirit of the handicapping system. Doesn't mean that they can't do it, but if anybody ever challenged us on it, that would be our standard line, is that it goes against the spirit of the system, because every single score is treated equally. I think they actually only do it when there is a tie or there is a specific issue with the player's scoring record. They compare general play and competition score, the average scores in each, to work out if they're the same. Most players, if you compare a genuine player's handicap record, general play to competition, there's usually about 2 strokes in it, up or down. If you get more than that, I'd start to worry of whether or not a player's using general play scores to manipulate. But it's only one part of a wider discussion. Scores which are not automatically submitted by an organising entity, a society, a league, a competition, must be returned by the player. It is the player's responsibility to ensure that scores are returned to their handicap record. However, if you as a golf club are aware that a player has played in an event and that score should have been entered into their record and they have not yet provided it to you, I would check with them and ask them where it is, and then I would put it in, because it needs to go in. If they turn around and go, I didn't want to put it in, you can put it in as a penalty score, but it should still go in. Okay. And again, if players fail to comply with those procedures, then you can look at how you can act as a handicap committee, whether that be a disciplinary matter, whether it be a penalty score. The list is endless of where you can go with that, depending on the outcome and what's come from it. This one's pretty straightforward, and it's not really a change. It's just ensuring that when players play general play scores, if they knowingly fail to apply a penalty in that round, previously that score would have just been discarded and kicked out, and we'd just get rid of it. It'd be disqualified as such as you would be in a competition. However, what we're now saying is that you can actually correct that error and ensure that that scorecard goes in the player's record. So you would either record the actual score, so you know what the penalty would be, you would adjust the whole score and put that in. If you don't know what the penalty was, or maybe they recorded a 0, or they picked up, or they just they haven't recorded anything, you can record a net double bogey, or you can apply a net par. Depends on whether you feel that the player was trying to manipulate that score to give them a better or a worse score than they actually would have got in the first place. Okay? Now, this is where we start to take a little bit of a change, and we go into probably the biggest and most significant change for 2024 for golfers, you as golf clubs, and everybody within GB&I. Prior to, and this will actually come into effect, I believe it is in April for GB&I, so this is an April change. The course handicap calculation used to be this, which we've all seen before. course handicap equals your handicap index times the slope rating divided by 113. That's what we've always done, which basically means to play to handicap, we are playing to the course rating. If we return a score that's equal to course rating, we've played to our handicap. However, we are now changing that, and that is going to change in GB&I to follow the same process as more or less everybody else around the world. There will be around about 4 other countries that will still remain on the old calculation, but they will transition over the next 4 years, so that by the time we come to the next revision in 2028, there will only be one option for the course handicap calculator, and that will be this. We will now be including the difference between the course rating and the par. So you will see changes in your course handicaps at the golf club. Okay?
Will that automatically just come onto our...
So yeah, I'll just talk through that for you in a second. And it will, just to make it really consistent, it will be exactly the same calculation that we already use for 9 holes. So we already use course rating minus par in our current 9-hole calculation. All we're doing here now is making sure we use it for 18 holes as well. So they will be your 2 new course handicap formulas.
And that's been done why?
Sorry, where's the... Sorry,
why has that been done?
So the first thing is, when we were looking to transition from Congo into WHS, one of the primary discussions was the way that the course rating minus par, as we call it, is used elsewhere in the world, didn't really fit the way that we played golf. And it was sort of like we felt more comfortable saying, we want to stay where we are. We don't want to change. We want to stick here. And it took a bit of a battle. And I'll admit, I was one of the people that went, we don't need to change this. Let's just stay where we are. And I was a big sort of like part of saying, let's not move. However, 4 years on, you start to see people that are travelling more and going, well, hold on, why do they use course rating minus par and we don't? All the problems that we have around mixed golf, where if you've got men and women playing together, you have to apply an adjustment based on the difference in the course ratings. We can get rid of a lot of that using course rating minus par. It also means that your handicaps actually start to look, if you start to go and play a shorter golf course, your handicap starts to reduce the course handicap at a more natural rate than it did previously. So therefore you get in the right amount of shots for the hole and the par you're playing. So now your score will be against par, not against the course rating. Probably more intuitive for most players, that we understand what you played to today, or I was 10 over par. It's more intuitive for golfers than 10 over course rating, when that's a decimal number and you never actually work it out properly anyway. So.
Yeah, could you just very quickly go back to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, just to get that last one. And probably know the answer to this, but they're not retrospectively applying this to... No. This is purely from, I think it'll be the 1st of January, but I'm sure Wales Golf will confirm. But it isn't an April Fool, it's actually happening. But it will be that time frame that'll actually come into play. The home unions just need a little bit more time just to sort the software out, but we've given the same dispensation to all national associations. We always run the change through to April, as different golfing parts of the world are finishing their season when we're just starting ours, so it makes sense to give everybody a little bit longer. So like I said, it means that your growth score is going to be to handicap, is going to be against par now, instead of course rating. So here's an example of a player with a handicap index of 15. There's the course rating, 72, 70, 68. Par 70 across the board. The course handicap calculates at 19, 17 and 14. The target score would be exactly the same as if we were doing it in terms of versus par, versus course rating. So the target score's not changed, it's these numbers in the course handicap that have, and it's that provides them with the right number of shots to play a golf course that they've chosen to play on that particular day. So that's all it is. Play to handicap now means you're playing to par, not to course rating. Any more on that one? So what does it mean? And this is where I would normally defer to Sandy, if everybody knows who Sandy is. But he's stitched me up yesterday because he's ill, so he's not here. So I'll pick this up. What does this mean for you as a golf club? It means that you're going to need to change your boards, your course handicap boards, if you have boards on the first tee. You're going to need to change them. You will only need to change them if there is a difference between your course rating and your par. The chances are there will be. But if there isn't, then you don't need to do anything. But consider using different alternatives this time round. We know that there is a course handicap calculator on the app. There are now a lot of people are using QR code generation to have a QR code by the tee rather than a static board that they can just scan the QR code and look it up that way. Is there something else that you can do? Is there a smaller board? Is there different formats of actually getting that information to golf clubs? You shouldn't need to change any scorecards unless you have a course handicap table printed on the back of your scorecard. If you do, I'm pretty sure it'd be a pretty big scorecard. So hopefully nobody did that. So you shouldn't need to change anything there. Okay? Any other questions? No, all quiet. Good. So this is another slight change. And this is where I don't want you to get panicked or concerned by the fact I'm going to show you some formulas. I am not expecting you to be able to do these formulas by hand or be able to do some of these calculations. They are statistical calculations that take place in the system, but I wanted to show them to you so that when members ask you the question, you feel a little bit more confident in being able to answer those. So we're changing the way that we scale a score from a 9-hole score to an 18-hole score differential. So hopefully everybody knows that when we have a 9-hole score at the moment, we basically add 17 points for the holes that weren't played and then work out the 18-hole score differential based on the combined points for the front 9 plus the 17 Stableford points, and then we work out the score differential. We are going to change that. What we have found is that 17 points isn't correct for the majority of players, because if you're a higher handicap player, you're probably not going to shoot 17 points if you've only shot 12 on the front. So therefore, what does that number need to look like? And if you're a better player, there's a better chance that you're going to shoot more than 17 points. And therefore, you're being you're being given less shots than you actually should get. So we've changed that slightly. So we're now going to use something called the expected score. And just as a bit of a definition, a player's score is a score is expected to achieve over a number of holes on a course of standard difficulty. It's calculated using the player's handicap index and attributes a numerical value against any hole or holes not played. So this will work for less than 18 holes, so when they've not played 17 or 18, and we'll come on to that, or the 9-hole situation as well. So it's exactly the same the whole way through it. So what's the procedure? So we're going to calculate this 18-hole score differential. We're going to do it like this. So we're going to create an expected score differential for the 9 holes that the player does not play based on their index and a course of standard difficulty. So 113, okay? So a generic 9 holes. We're not going to go the 9th hole, the back 9 of the course that you played or anything like that. It's a generic number. We're also going to calculate the actual score differential for the 9 holes that the player did play. So we're going to work out that value as well. And then what we're going to do is combine those two values together to give us an 18-hole score differential. Okay. This is where I start to lose people and people start to look at me like I've gone mad. That's fine. So this is our example. This is Jane. course handicap of 16, and she scores 42. She has a net 42, sorry, a gross 42 on this front 9 here. So these come up in the wrong order, so I'll just put it all up. So the 9-hole score differential, we work out 113 divided by the 9-hole slope rating, gives us that value. We then work out the 9-hole par plus the 9-hole course handicap minus the points scored to work out what her score differential, that would be. And then we work out that her 9-hole score differential would be 5.42. So for the 9 holes that she played, not her score differential is 5.42. Don't worry, the computer's going to do it. Okay? Yeah. All you need to do is say, this is your score differential for 9 holes. They're not even going to see that number, but we've worked out your score differential for the 9 holes that you actually played. So that was what we've done there. We've calculated their score differential for the 9 holes that they actually played. We then need to work out what the expected score would be for a player of Jane's handicap index over that generic 113 golf course. So this would be then the calculation. So we would then have her actual differential plus her expected differential, giving us an 18-hole total. So go into that a little bit more. So we've got our 5.42. The computer has calculated that Jane's expected score for the 9 holes, the other 9, would be 9.52. Okay, that's her expected score. So whenever you see in my presentation, whenever you see this little computer icon, it means the computer's going to generate that for you. You don't need to do it. Okay? But that will be their expected score differential. And we add that then to her actual differential to give us our 18-hole total. As you can see, if I go on to my, well, we know that Jane's handicap's going to be around about 16. So she's played, on that front 9 that she did play, she's played better than her expected score. So we expected her to score 9.52. She actually scored 5.42, so she's played better than expected as an 18-hole round, which we would expect. So this gives us an example of where you've got the same adjusted gross score, 42, and so that gives us a standard value of 5.42, irrelevant of their handicap index. Okay, that's what the score differential would be. But if you then look at players with different handicap indexes, you'll see how that 18-hole score differential changes. So the bottom one here is Jane, with our 14.9. We then have a player at the top there with a 4 handicap. Their score differential for 18 holes would be 8.7. So they've played higher than handicap, so they're higher. Player with a handicap index of 10, their 18-hole score differential 11.8. More or less there or thereabouts in terms of handicap. And like I said, Jane, handicap index 16, she's played better than handicap. So you can start to see how this actually gives you, depending on if you've got the same player with the same handicap index, different handicap index, is scoring the same number of points, or scoring the same score differential, that they will actually have a different 18-hole differential when it comes to the end. That is far easier to explain to a player than the current way, where they just can't understand why, if 2 people have both got the same score, they get a really different score differential even though they're the same handicap. And that's what's happening at the moment. You get a difference because of where they get their strokes and where they actually played. And just again, a different example, but using higher handicap players. So an adjusted gross score of 56 gives us a score differential of 22. And then again, 34 handicap index player scored 49, 40.9, 42, 45.0, 50, 49.2. Again, you can see that difference. But it means that it's more consistent, certainly when we go to the higher end, where more 9-hole rounds are actually played. Okay? Everybody all right with 9 holes. Like I said, you don't need to do anything. We're not asking you to do anything with this. It's just so that you understand that it is changing and that you might see a bit of a change, or the players might ask slightly different questions. They're probably not going to see a change in this either, to be fair, unless somebody sits there and reads through the rules of handicapping. But what do we do when a hole isn't played? So somebody's playing an 18-hole round, but they don't play the last 2 holes. What do we do now? How do we work that out? Currently, we give them net double bogey, but again, actually, net double bogey might be too high for some players in terms of the allocation that we're giving them for those holes that they didn't play. So again, we're going to use the same process of this expected score, but for 2 holes rather than 9, okay, or 3 holes, or 4 holes, or 5 holes. And again, I'll explain. It's a little bit more complicated and it goes into a little bit more detail, but I'll explain how that works. So a score from a round when 1 or more holes hasn't been played may be used for handicapping if the round has been played over at least the minimum number of holes, either 9 or 18. So if you're playing 9, you've got to play all 9. If you're playing 18, it's 10 or more. The reason for not completing the round was valid, and we'll come on to valid and invalid in a second. And we have included some stronger guidance in terms of what is a valid score and what isn't a valid score in the rules of handicapping, just to help golf clubs, because we know we got a lot of feedback on that it was a bit of a grey area and left too much open to interpretation. So, when is a reason for not finishing valid? Fading light or weather preventing the continuation of play. That is a change. It just said bad weather. We all know that it can start spitting and people start coming in off the golf course because it's raining. It's bad out there. I'm coming in. And they use it as an excuse to not complete their round. It has to be weather that prevents the continuation of play. The course is flooded. Thunder and lightning. There's a danger to players, whatever that might be. If the course is closed, the green staff close the golf course for safety reasons, then that's a valid reason for not continuing play. Player illness or injury. You fall and break your ankle on the fourth hole. It's a valid reason for not finishing your round. I would add to that, you get an emergency phone call saying you've got to go and pick your daughter up from school, or she's not well. Or I would add into that sort of idea and concept as well. A valid reason is that the number of holes available to play doesn't meet 9 or 18. So, for example, you've had to close the 16th hole because of all the bad weather. It's underwater. You've had a burst banks of a river and it's underwater. You can't play it. So, therefore, 16's out of play. That's fine. Just play 17 holes. That's a valid reason for not completing that hole. It could be that there's maintenance. You're having to fell some trees and you've closed the hole for safety reasons. That's fine. Or it could just be that you decide that you don't want to play the 16th in your competition and you're just going to play a 17-hole competition. It's fine. Or the 13-hole competition or 12-hole competition or whatever it might be. As long as you've played either 9 or 10, like 9 holes for a 9-hole round or 10 holes for an 18-hole round, it can go in. Okay? We've added a catch-all. Any other situation that the committee considered reasonable. So just in case we've missed anything, if you think it's a reasonable reason for somebody not completing their round, then you're good to go. Yeah, okay, the reason you didn't finish was valid. That's fine. We'll let that one go. Invalid reasons. The weather doesn't prevent continuation of play, so it's spitting no longer counts as a reason. Knowing that a particular hole on a golf course causes them difficulty and they're likely to return a high score, so they choose not to play it. No, you can't do that. Not submitting the last few holes on the course because you're playing badly, you're playing well, or the rugby's on, and then walking in. There's smiling faces that means That's actually happened, and it does. It's normally the football where I up in the northwest, but it's usually the football's on a Saturday afternoon, and the lads want to get into the bar and watch it rather than finish their round. And again, we've put the catch-all there of anything considered unreasonable by the committee. So in these cases, that score wouldn't go into the player's record at all because they've not completed. But if they continue to do it and they're repeat offenders, you might decide to apply a penalty score. To serve them right, they should have completed their round. That's up to you as a committee. You can do that. And every time I say committee, I'm not talking about one person making the decision. I'm talking about a group of people. At least 3 of you need to make that call. It's not up to one person to make a decision from a handicap perspective. Like I said, we can determine that one or more holes is considered invalid, the score is not acceptable, and you can post a penalty score. However, if there is a valid reason, then we create the differential using the expected score for the holes that they didn't play. So we've extended Jane's round here to give us a back 9, or in this case a back 7, because she didn't play the 17th and 18th hole. It was a valid reason. We've already established that with Jane. So what we need to do now is we need to create a 16-hole score differential and an expected score differential for 2 holes. So that poses us a number of problems. The first one being that we don't have a course rating for 16 holes. We have 9 and we have 18. We don't have a slope rating for 16 holes. So therefore, what do we do? So this is the first step we're going to look at. So what do we do know is that we have a rating for the front 9 that she did complete. So we know that's 36. But we need to estimate what's going to be her rating, or what's going to be the rating for the back 7 holes. We also need to know what the slope rating is going to be for the 16 holes, but we do know that on the holes she played, she had a 78. Pretty good score for a 16 handicap player, if you ask me. So again, this is the little symbol, means that we're going to carry out that calculation for you. But what we are going to do is the holes that we don't have a complete rating for, we are going to work out that rating using the number of holes that were played, the length of the holes that were included in that number, and the course rating information and the par. So we use all that information to create this extra rating that we need for those 7 holes. The slope rating is used as a weighted average, so we just weight average that across depending on how many holes they've played. So we can start to fill in now some of those blanks. So we estimate that the rating for the 7 holes that she did play on the back 9 will be 27.9. That then gives us a 16-hole course rating of 63.9. We estimate that the slope rating for the 16 holes will be 125. And then, like I said, we already know what her adjusted gross score was for the 16 holes. So we can then do that calculation. We've added those in. They were done by the computer. We know our adjusted gross score. So we can work out that the score differential for the 16 holes that she did play was 12.8. So 12.8 is our starting figure, just like it was with the 5.2 on the 9 hole. We now add that to our expected score for the 2 holes that she didn't play. And again, the computer does this. Tells us that her expected score differential, and this is her differential, not her score, was 2.1. 2.12 for the 2 holes that she didn't play. That then gives her a gives her a 18-hole score differential of 14.9. Okay, so that would be the score differential that would go into Jane's record for that round. Okay. Sounds complicated. There is a lot of people looking at me going, you have lost the plot. I don't want you to, like I said, don't worry about it. This is statistically sound. We know that it works. We know that it's actually better than the method we're currently using. We also know that this works better as we move down our projected line of improvements of the system, which means that we have a lot of golf courses now that are 12 holes around the world. We need to be able to give those a 12-hole course rating. We need to be able to allow players to return scores over a non-standard traditional golf course. So this is all part of that modernisation. We're bringing it in bit by bit as we get it ready, rather than having another massive change in 8 years' time or 4 years' time. So this is a gradual process to an ultimate end goal that will be a massive improvement for the game. So how do we designate holes not played? It could be totally up to your software vendor. If you're on the app, then it asks you the question, did you not complete the hole or did you not play the hole? So again, we need to make sure that members are getting that right. If you're not sure how players should designate a hole not played on your terminal at the golf club, I would suggest you ask your software vendor how they mark that. It could be a 0, it could be leave it blank, because if they actually apply the wrong one, they're going to get a net double bogey when actually they should have been getting an expected score. So we just need to make sure that people are applying it in the correct way. Was that?
Yeah, that happened to us last week because we had 2 holes out of play because of trees were being felled. It was 18-hole competition set. So when the players came in, they did not play for those 2 holes.
Yeah.
And it gave everybody an NR.
Yeah.
So we had to go in then physically do 99 cards.
Yeah. And that's because the software hadn't been set up for 60.
There was no other option.
Yeah.
To do it.
Yeah.
It was literally thrown on us that moment.
Yeah. So, and you like sometimes some of the software will let you change how many holes you play and mark the holes as not played, so that happens automatically. But yeah, it will do. It'll throw it up as everybody's failed to complete their round. So just check with them what they want you to record when it's hole not played versus a net double bogey. Obviously, for handicap purposes, and then I would still go in your handicap record and would still use this formula. So that's just a competition error that you can sort out quite easily with your software vendor if you ask the right questions. Everything else all right? Like I said, this is just to make sure that we're getting that right so that it's being applied correctly throughout the system. Probably another one of the controversial points that we get a lot of questions around is PCC. People are laughing at me already about PCC. I think this is the idea behind the PCC was to be able to adjust the course rating based on conditions that were not normal. And how do you define conditions not being normal? Because it can be very different from one day to the next. So what does that look like? So we do this through scores. And this is the really important thing. We look at players' actual scores versus their expectation. So again, using that term expected score, we know what a player is expected to score over a defined number of holes, and we compare that to their actual score to see how much different it is between the two. Abnormal course conditions can be due to weather, but they can also be due to course setup. Your greenkeeper could have had a really bad day and put every single pin behind a bunker. Makes it almost impossible for players to get to the pin position. All the tees could be moved up, so it could be a slightly shorter course. They could all be moved back. It could be playing slightly longer than rated. So there's plenty of different things that could let the rough grow. They've not cut it that could affect the course, the PCC. So basically the PCC means that if you have a bad score on a hard day, it could still actually look like a good score within your record. That's the idea behind it. So what does the calculation do? Well, it's a statistical procedure that compares all eligible scores, and we'll come on to eligible scores in a second, against the expected score based on the makeup of the field. It's really important that we talk about the makeup of the field, and again, I'll come back to that in a second. But each player has an expected scoring range based on their handicap index. If significantly less players attain their expected score, we believe that course conditions were harder. If significantly more players achieved their expected score, then we believe conditions were lower, were easier, therefore the PCC would be a -1. So it's got to be a significant number of players that have found, based against their expected score, that have been easier or harder. It's not one player or two players, it's got to be a significant number. Adjustment between -1 and +3, which we know about, and basically that moves enough players into that expected range. So you imagine the trumpet, and I'll show you the trumpet in a minute. The idea being is that trumpet moves up or down to get the relevant number of players within that trumpet that we can say, okay, that's where it needs to be. There's more players in the trumpet now. The PCC is going to be -1, or we need to move it up because it now needs to be a +2. So we can do that.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Is this based on different teas as well on that day?
So everything gets put into one massive pot.
Yeah.
So what we do is we put everybody's scores into one pot, and I'll explain that in a second in a bit more detail. But everybody goes in, and then based on the makeup of that field, so they're based on the number of players that played off the red tee,
Right.
off a rating of 125. So that might be the ladies' tee. So if there was 10% of the field there, and there was 25% of the field played off the yellow tees, and the rest all played off the white, it's weighted accordingly. So we work out the average based on a weighted adjustment, the average slope. So the weighted slope rating for that field, the weighted course rating, and then work out what everybody's expected score would be.
Can I ask a supplementary?
Yeah.
We were talking about the vagaries of greenkeepers. Quite often we find that the ladies could be put forward in the men's back, or the men's put forward in the other way. So they're not put the
Yeah.
same.
It doesn't have to be. That's why we build everything into the course rating calculation. So every set of tees that we rate has a tolerance of around about the tee boxes. You've got 100 yards to play with over the whole golf course before it affects your rating. So you could put 9 tees forward 5 yards and 9 tees back 5 yards, and you get the same net yardage that you're playing. And that's exactly the same would be for the men as well. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any. As long as there's no more than 100 yards difference between where your tee boxes are and your fixed measuring point, it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
So we talked about the comparison and the size of the field. So we're comparing the actual number of players that scored within the tolerance to those that we expected of the same range. So here's the example. The more scores we have on a day, the narrower the tolerance can be. So the more accurate it is. If we only have a few scores, and they'll be right at that far end where the trumpet's really, really wide, then the tolerance is going to be really, really wide, because somebody could have played really well and somebody could have played really badly, but we've not got enough statistical evidence to say that we need to change the PCC. And I think one of our biggest issues is that a lot of our PCC, certainly in GB&I, are in sort of like this area here. So the tolerances are really wide. So we're not seeing as many changes under this system as we did under the old CSS system. But that's intended, because the CSS used to change 60% of the time, which was far too much, where now we're only actually moving away from 0 around about 20% of the time, which means it's more accurate, but only when we have more scores in the record.
You say CSS, going back to the old days, you say CSS used to change too much, but it changed relative to the scores. And nowadays, I think it's fair to say, and I think there's even been communication that PCC hasn't been working properly. We've heard that through different communications. But some will say now that the PCC isn't changing appropriately to how hard the course played on a given day. Now, you also said, Gemma, that scores are used to produce this.
Yeah.
Well, of course they are, because we can't press the button and say it was really windy today.
Yeah.
Or it was no rain today. So scores can be the only
Yes.
creator of this, but it doesn't seem to have, you could itself where it's been a tough day.
Yeah.
And the PCC is 0.
So we made a change last August to the PCC calculation. So not August just gone, the August before, to the PCC calculation that was for implementation in January. GB and I applied it as soon as we got it. So as soon as that landed with us, we got the technology system to make the change, and it was applied straight away. So we were able to send 3 months worth of data, which was actually only really 1 month of competition data and like season data, in-season data to the RNA to be analysed. We've actually just preparing our annual data request to all national associations, which we'll get in January, and we can then look at the impact that PCC has had since that change has been made over a full season. And as we've shown by making the change 18 months ago, if it's still not right, we'll make another tweak to it. We'll get the statisticians to re-look at the formula and see how that's applied. But I think what we've got to try and remember, this is a worldwide calculation. This isn't an England golf, a Wales golf, this is across the world. And the current system for some parts of the world moves a lot more. So the USGA are seeing a lot of variation in their PCC because their field size and number of scores returned on a day is a lot higher, because every time a player sets foot onto the golf course, they have to return a score. So the more scores we have in, the more accurate it is. And like I said, we're in that band at the moment, that wider band at the end, where we probably could do with getting even another 20 scores per day into the system would give us a more accurate PCC. And it sounds silly saying 20 scores would that make so much difference. Yeah, it would. So I think there's things that we can still learn, and we're not afraid to make the change if we need to.
The 20% thing you quote, is that a worldwide figure? Because this club here, competition crazy.
Yeah.
From first light to last light, but PCC just, you never see.
Yeah, no, that's a global, yeah. It's not specific to a country. It's based on our data from last time. So what is the PCC? So again, it's performed once a day. So that's why we need as many scores. All acceptable formats: 9, 18 holes, competition, recreational. This is a key one. We only look at players with a handicap index of 36 or below in the PCC calculation. So if you have a lot of players returning scores that are higher handicap than 36.0, they're not included in the calculation. So again, that's where we're saying about that, the number of scores, we actually get rid of quite a few because they're in that higher handicap category. And it's automatically applied within the system to everybody that's returned a score on that particular day. So again, just a bit of a refresh really on where we are with PCC.
Can I check my understanding of what Martin just said?
Yeah.
And also there's a question I was going to ask anyway. PCC for, say, Whitchurch on a given day, is that purely specific to the scores at Whitchurch that given day, or is it a wider range?
No, purely specific to the scores that returned at your club on that day.
Because I've had other managers say to me, no, it's regional.
No, it's based on your scores on that day. The reason that might have been out is that in Australia, that's what they used to do. They used to do it almost by state, and they used to do sort of a morning and afternoon one, because they had and we always thought it was madness, because even some of their states are probably just as big as the UK, and they were changing like the same PCC across a whole state. Made no sense. So again, they've changed to this, and they're seeing PCC change more. So the 20% is an average across the world based on all the scoring data that we had in 2022. I was on to 2023 then, but the data that we received for 2022.
Can I ask, if you've got a non-qualifying competition, that's...
There is no such thing as a non-qualifying competition.
You want to tell people about that?
You cannot have them. You can have non-counting scores, and the only way that a scores can be non-counting is if you've not played to the rules of golf, or the course is not set up to be playing qualifying golf. So you can't just go, we won't play a competition. We'll play a competition, but we won't have it for handicap purposes today. You can't do that. If it's a competition and you play by the rules and you meet all the criteria, it's a competition. Okay. So the next one, hopefully, I know we're doing for time, we're good. The next one that I'm going to move on to is hopefully something that will be welcomed. It was certainly welcomed yesterday. I think I got cheers yesterday. Which is going to be the introduction of being able to add individual scores from 4-ball, better ball competitions into players' handicap records. Now, first point I want to make here is these are not acceptable scores. These are not acceptable scores that you will see on the acceptable scores format chart in the rules of handicapping. This is going to be a separate clause in the rule book, and it's on there, 5.10 of the new book. And this is where national associations have the discretion to include this clause in their rule book, whereby when a player or when a team in a 4-ball, better ball competition returns a score of more than 42 points or 6 better than par, if they're playing at a medal round, they can have that score interrogated further for potential inclusion into a player's handicap record. Now, the software is going to do this from April. So as long as 4-ball, better ball scores are returned through your handicap software, then these will be included. And I would strongly ask that if you run 4-ball, better ball opens going forward, you run them through your club software rather than just having Bob collect all the scorecards in and do it all by hand, which some golf clubs still do, because he's done it for the last 40 years and likes doing it. So we would like him to now use a computer, because this way we can get these scores into players' handicap records.
That's a question just on
Yep.
ISVs. Have the ISVs got a mandate to include this? We use a particular one, just going back to one of the very first slides that you did, and we were told that they weren't interested in putting a maximum score format that we could use in their competitions module. As Lanish and as Martin alluded to, we play a lot of competition golf, play a lot of 4-ball golf. There could be a chance whereby they turn around to us and say, we don't want to do this.
If they are not compliant to the rules of handicapping, which maximum hole score, and this will be included in, then I would be suggesting that you speak to Zoe and Hannah, because they're potentially in breach of their licence, because it's part of that. If it's part of the rules of handicapping and it's written in the book, they have to ensure that it can be done through the competition software. So the score of 42 points is our first point. So we've got 3 things that we check every score for. 42 points being the first one. So if you've scored 42 points or more, you're potentially having a score put in your record. The next one is, has an individual player featured on the scorecard at least 9 times? So has one person been on 11 times and one been on 7 times? Or have they had 9 scores each been taken? So we work that out. And then for the holes that they didn't actually come in on, and we'll go through that in a second, we give them another score. And then we say, if once all that's calculated, their score would be greater than 36 points, we will then put it in their handicap. So if they only scored 22 points, it's not going to do anything other than maybe bring them down. So we're not going to put it in. Take them up, so we're not going to put it in. It's almost like 4-ball, better ball scores reduction only, but don't quote me on that, because that's the term that obviously everybody used to use. So it's basically saying if it's 36 points as an individual score, it'll go in. If it doesn't break that threshold, it won't. So what do we do? So when we do it, we look at the holes where they actually did score. So if on the 9 holes that they did score, we will use those 9 hole scores. So if they've scored 38 points in 9 holes, we'll use the points that they've scored across those holes. If the player's score doesn't count, they will receive 1.5 points, Stableford points, for the holes where they did not score. Excuse me. If their partner only scored 1 point, we're not going to give them 1.5 because that's a bit mean. We'll only give them 1 point. And if no player scored, we'll give them 0. Okay? And then we work all that out. We add the difference between the player's course handicap and their playing handicap. So there will be a difference because obviously there's an allowance. So we add that in terms of to the points. And then we round it to the nearest whole number. And it is that whole number that we will then add into the player's record as the number of points scored for that round. Okay? Again, the software is going to do this for you. You put your scores in through your platforms and it'll come through to the clubhouse, and the clubhouse will do these calculations and work out which scores go into records and which don't. So it will be done centrally from April. If you want to do it before April, good luck, you're going to do it manually. And you'll get the rule book, I'm sure. It'll be available from January that you can have a look at it and then start to work out how you do it manually. But from April, this will be included in your software. Okay? So I think this is beneficial because we've all seen those players that play a lot of 4-ball, better ball golf and never get a handicap adjustment. So we're now starting to introduce that. This is a slight stepping stone and a baby step. In the US, they already use 4-ball, better ball scores. In Australia, they use 4-ball, better ball scores. The slight difference is, in the US, they use most likely score, which if anybody's ever seen that is the worst thing ever. Imagine being 10 yards off a green. Because I'm a 6 handicap player, I'm 10 yards off a green, and I basically get to I've decided I'm picking my ball up, and I can just add 2 shots to my score and say that's my score for this hole. I'm not bothering playing. That doesn't make sense. And if you've seen my short game, it definitely doesn't make sense because it could quite easily be 4 or 5 from that point. So this is a stepping stone to allowing more 4-ball, better ball scores, but without going down the route of most likely score.
So will they both have to have the scores on the card? Or?
They don't all, so they both have to record in each column who scored.
Yeah, no, they do that, but would they want to put both scores down?
No.
I was thinking people
No.
time then.
No, we don't. That's the whole point of it's just if they record their score. So the first ball in the hole is the one that gets recorded on almost. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Next up, we're on the handicap review, the annual handicap review. Now, you're all coming into review periods at the moment where you'll hopefully be looking at handicap reviews as a handicap committee, not as an individual, as I mentioned before. However, this is the process for 2024. So this is slightly changing for 2024. But the good thing is there's already elements of this update in your clubhouse system now. So if you've seen this screen, it's not great, but see this screen in the clubhouse, which has got your reports in, there are a load of handicapping reports, and some of the ones that we're going to be using for next year's annual review are actually already in your clubhouse platform. So feel free to go in there and have a look at them this year, use them as evidence in your review, not a problem at all. So again, the handicap committee is a vital role in regards to the handicap system and administrating the handicap system for players. I said the handicap committee needs to conduct a review at least once a year. And I say at least once a year. You could do it twice a year if you wanted to. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. I know that in the US they are going to be doing 2 yearly reviews. Going forward, they're going to be trying to encourage clubs to do 2 per year, mainly because of the size of the membership. But you could do that if you wanted to. It needs to be consistent and objective in its approach. And again, like I said, we've recommended some new reports that will be available in software. these reports will identify players who consistently score below or above expectation. Okay, so this is highlighting based on statistical data where players are playing better or worse than expected. This isn't, we don't know what these people are, who these people are, what they do when they play golf, what they look like. This is purely based on the scores that they return, their scores, and the statistical data. Doesn't mean to say that you can't take into consideration all the other stuff as well.
So we've just done ours, and the exceptional scores came out, and the question was asked was, if an exceptional score's in the record, why surely that is already reflecting against the current handicap? When that goes in, they get cut for that.
Yeah.
So then we were saying, well, why would we cut them again?
Because I'll talk about the flags in a moment. The flags will pick out scores, but it'll only pick out scores when the players have more than sort of 3. Okay. So if they've got a flag, if they've got 3 flags on their record and they've been flagged for a reduction, and it's saying they've got 3 low flags, it means that not only have they got that 1 low flag that will have been generated from the ESR, they've got 2 more scores somewhere in their record in the last year's worth of scores that have also triggered the same flag, which could potentially then mean actually this player needs a further reduction. Now, just because a player is flagged either high or low doesn't mean that you have to change their handicap. It's a recommendation. So we'll go on to talk about where they come in. So we use the player equation again. We've talked about the player equation and expected score, and it's all part of the same. A lot of the same numbers are used throughout a lot of these. And we use these to predict the player's next score and their expected standard deviation from that score. So we know that the lower the handicap of the player, the less tolerance that they're going to have, because they're not really going to shoot 10 under very often, if at all. And they're not really going to shoot that many rounds that are 10 over. So they're always going to be there or thereabouts, whereas a higher handicap player could quite easily shoot 20 under if they've had a really, really good day, an exceptional score. But they could very, very easily shoot 18, 19 over on a daily basis. So they have that the ability to play well, but also the ability to play very badly. So there's a broader spectrum. And the reason for that, and the reason that we set these upper and lower tolerances, is we use 3 standard deviations upwards. Yes, upwards. So we expect players to score a little bit higher, and we use 2 standard deviations below their expected. So we know that they're going to play low, but when we actually, if they play really well, we want them to come down quicker. So that's why it's 2 low and 3 high. And that's based on the fact that non-normal distribution of scores means that players are more likely to play high than they are low, and that actually players play better than their expected score only 2.5% of the time. So it's a very, very small number where players play below their expected score. So it's quite interesting when you actually look at scores around the world. People think they're playing to their handicap every single week. To 2 handicap, yeah, great, but they're never going to play beyond the expected that often. Some of the new reports that we're going to use is that standard deviation from expected performance. We're going to look at trends, so we're going to see how a player's handicaps moved over the course of 12 months, over the period. This will help you identify any potential building of handicaps just before your club championship, or anybody that might have suddenly dropped off because you know they've won 2 or 3 competitions, and then you start to see that build again. They start to identify trends. You can look at a player's scoring record. You could compare the difference between competitive rounds and general play rounds. Again, we talked about that idea that most players are going to be within about 2 strokes. We know sometimes in general play, players play better. No pressure. Pressure's off. You can just go out there and play and enjoy it. You pick a nice day. Understandable, but there's not that many occasions where you're going to play significantly better than that 2 strokes. So if your average is more than 2, if a player's average is more than 2, what's going on? Performance in unauthorised formats. So how have they done in the medal, in the match play events? Have they played really well in the match play? If you're looking potentially at using that for one player, so the winner of the match play event, have a look at how he's fared during the course of the matches. Has he been winning 10 and 8, or has he been winning on the 18th? Because to win and win on the 18th, that's expected, that's the whole point. But if he's winning every round in the early part of like the back 9, then is he correctly handicapped? Okay? So look at different things. And then you can look at whether players play more at home or away, and how the scores are different when they play at home to away. And then if they play more 9 holes to 18 holes, again, is there anything that can identify? So we've got a number of new reports that you're going to be able to use to help with that. The new review report will also give you a recommendation going forward. So if you've just run your current one this time, you'll just see it will say player A has got this many scores, this handicap index, he's got 4 high flags. It won't give you anything else, it just says 4 high flags. What we're actually going to do is add another column to that and give you a recommendation and say we recommend this player for a 1-shot or a 2-shot increase. And that's based on us making the adjustment in the background and seeing what happens, and then we'll just present that to you for you to make that decision as a committee once you've taken into consideration everything else. So the report is the starting point, and then you build the picture behind everything as you go through. So when we apply an adjustment, obviously applying the adjustment remains at the discretion of the committee. After taking into consideration the report and all the information and any other knowledge that you have of that player's demonstrated ability. Once you've considered all that, then you can make your decision of whether or not you want to apply an adjustment. If you are going to apply an adjustment, it has to be at least 1 full stroke. You can't apply half a stroke to somebody. It has to be at least 1 full stroke. And it cannot be more than 5 strokes from the player's low handicap index unless you've gained approval from Wales Golf. Okay, the system won't let you go 5 more if you need to put a player's handicap up. Restriction down, there isn't one, so you can go down as much as you want, but you can only go up by 5, and it has to be at least 1 full stroke. Right, just going back to this 1 second. Also on here, what I would say is one of the big things that a lot of golf clubs forget to do when they're doing the annual review is they've got their list of players that they're going to adjust. And you'll see some golf clubs who will go and say, Brenda, would you like your 2 shots back? And she goes, no. And they go, okay. Don't apply it. She clearly needs it. The numbers are telling us she needs it. So I don't want it isn't a reason for not giving it. So you need to inform the player. So I would do that in writing or as an email. So either an actual letter or an email. And basically give them a time scale. So say, the committee have met, we've done the handicap review, we're going to say that you need a handicap increase of 2 shots, and this is going to take place from this date. And then on that day, apply the adjustment, unless the player has come to you and appealed that decision, or asked for information or clarity over why that decision's been made. I sat in before with the legal side about ensuring that you document everything and you get your process in place, exactly the same for your handicap review. Because if it goes to an appeal, then they're going to ask how the committee came up with that decision, and you need to be able to provide that evidence. And as I always say, is if you follow the process and you follow procedure, that when it comes to handicapping, Wales Golf will have your back as a golf club if it goes any higher than outside of the golf club, because you followed the process and the procedure in terms of whether or not to apply the adjustment. If you go in there all guns blazing and ignore procedure and do it on your own and just apply it because he's won the match play, but you've no other justification for cutting him, they're not going to stand by you. They're going to tell you that you need to put his handicap back to where it was. So make sure you follow the procedure. Any questions on this? We've got like one little bit more, last bit to do, and then we are good. And that's something around establishing par. Now, again, this isn't really new. It's a recommendation that's coming in, and it's slightly linked into our CR minus par discussion that we had really early on in the session around using par within the course handicap calculation. And this is just how we set pars. You'll see in this table, it's in the current handicap rule book. So the yardages and the detail in there hasn't changed, but obviously just to identify that there is crossover on each of the categories. So something could measure as a par 4, but you might want to play it as a par 5. And that could be that it's all uphill. It's all uphill. It never truly plays the yardage that it is because you're not getting enough roll. The ball's not getting there. You might play it as a par 5, and that's totally acceptable. I wouldn't go too far beyond these. If you were like a yard outside of it or 2 yards, nobody's gonna bother. But I wouldn't be going 10 yards either way. I wouldn't be going outside of it by more than that because then it's actually unrealistic when it comes to your course rating as well. So we're recommending the fact that you use the same standardised par across all tees on your golf course, so that we're not going to be changing pars as we get shorter. So this is the example where the blue tee here, the back tee, is a par 5. It's always par 5. It's a long hole, but actually the yellow tee, which is a shorter hole, but it's still the same, you're still playing uphill, probably going to be played by older members or maybe members that are just starting off in the game. They have to now play that as a par 4 because practically that's what the yardage is telling us. But what we're saying is set your pars based on your most commonly played set of tees. So if your most commonly played set of tees is going to be your yellow tee, because that's what you use most often, set your pars based on the yellow tee. If it is going to be the white tee, set your pars based on a white tee. If you only play that blue tee twice a year, don't set your pars on it. Set your pars on what you would normally play, and then if you need to adjust the pars on that blue, you're only adjusting them on one, not on the rest of the golf course. So it's just basically saying, how's the hole designed to be played, and then keeping that par consistent across it. It means that when we do move tees forward for beginners or for keeping our older players playing the game, making the courses a little bit easier for them, that they're playing the way that they should. They know just because you're moving them 20 yards doesn't mean to say that they're going to be able to hit the green in 2 now. They're still not. They still need 3 shots to get there. So just take that into consideration. It's not a mandated, it's not something that you have to do. All we're saying is when you come to look at your pars again, maybe when you come in to reprint scorecards or you're about to be course rated, just consider whether or not you need to make any changes to your pars based on this new guidance. Any questions? Have I caught you up a bit there?
Yeah, you've still got 15 minutes.
I know, we've still got 15 minutes, so.
Keep going,
Do we have some questions?
Purpose of a penalty score. Loaded question. What does it achieve? What does a penalty score do to a handicap record?
So directly, it might not do a lot. It depends on whether or not that score becomes one of the best 8 in the last 20 scores. So it could bump out a good score and change a player's handicap index. It could go in there as one of the better scores. And you would only put a penalty score in if you know that the player's either in breach or they've not carried out one of their responsibilities. And we always say you should, based on what they're trying to achieve, do the opposite.
Yeah, okay, that was the loaded part.
Yeah.
Manipulators kind of know that the penalty score will maybe take them up anyway, so you don't want to put it in that.
No, exactly. So look at what that penalty score would do. If you know that penalty score is going to knock off something that was an exceptional score and the best score in their record, and that would drop to their 20th score, don't put it in, and just score. We're not putting it in because we know what you were trying to do. That's fine, but I would just use penalty scores to try and counteract what they're trying to do. And if they're not trying to do it maliciously, can't even say the word, then you might just want to put something equal to their current handicap, just so that it's a score that's in there that flags to you when you come to do the annual review that something went on, and then you can start to think about, well, do we need to make that adjustment, or do we leave him as he is? We've got loads of time for questions. So.
Yeah, no, this is probably more for Wales Golf than it is for you. We had our course remeasured in April 12 months ago. It hasn't yet been re-rated. You had some backlog with the...
Yeah, we have had
Do
some
we know
delays.
what that is?
Shortage of volunteers.
Yeah, no, but when what's our waiting list time?
I don't know. I can check with Sandy and get back to you.
It's quite important because obviously all of this is based on the length and the difficulty.
Yeah, I think what I would say is if the length of your golf course, if you've had it remeasured and you're due for re-rating, unless there's been a significant change in length, you're probably not going to see a lot of difference in your rating, because the rating system hasn't changed that much. So you're not going to see a massive difference in a new rating, other than if the trees have grown a little bit, or if the greens are being cut.
Changed, trees have fallen down and things have been...
Yeah, so things fall down, things grow.
Yeah.
They almost counterbalance each other, so it's very much a case of don't expect to change, so just carry on as if nothing was going to change, but be prepared that obviously they're going to come out and rate you at some point. I know that all the countries around GB&I have been struggling for volunteers. The weather this year has not helped at all, because you can't rate a golf. If you've seen any raters out there, you can't rate a golf course in the rain. They've got too many bits of paper, or some of them now use tablets to actually go out and rate, or you just can't do it when it's wet. So you've got to sort of like take that into consideration as well. But volunteers is a massive one. Like getting people that are willing to give up time to go and help rate golf courses is huge. So if anybody is bored and fancies doing a little bit, it's like 2 or 3 days a year.
We recruited quite a few this year. We did a recruitment drive and we've done training, and we're just training them up on the course, so it should
It's good.
improve.
It's good. I've learned to love course rating. I never liked it when I first started at England Golf, but I've learned to enjoy it. You start to see golf courses in a very different way, and realising that golf courses, they don't play the way that you think they play when you look at it on paper, and it opens your eyes to how you should play a golf course. Any other
I've got a printout of all that, have you?
of
Your presentation.
We'll send
the
it to
coming
you
round?
after.
Yeah, because that's another thing. I mean, I've done loads of searches to see what these rules changes might be, and there's nothing...
No, so this is the... Yes.
You do it.
Feel free.
No,
We haven't officially launched the changes yet. We've been talking to national associations and federations around the world about the changes. Our official launch, you'll actually get to hear about it before anybody else. Our official launch isn't actually until the first week in November, and that's when globally all the changes will be announced. So that's why you've not heard anything.
Right, okay, because I looked at the RA site and it just says,
They're coming soon. Yeah, no, nothing will change yet. Early November, we're just pulling together some final bits of education materials. So we'll have education materials that you can use to educate players on all these topics, and there'll be a lot of stuff coming out then. Was there a question?
Yeah, it might be a stupid one. I haven't really dealt with it before, and well, it's my first year doing any sort of handicap review, and a soft and hard cap effect came into play quite a lot. Could you explain a little bit about how it comes about?
Yeah, so a soft cap is basically when a player's handicap has increased more than 3 strokes above their low index. So first of all, we set their low index, which is the lowest index in the last 12 months, the last 365 days. If they gradually start to climb, so a declining golfer, Once they get to 3 strokes above that, we sort of like slam on the brakes and we slow them down because we don't want them going up too quickly, but we know they still need to go up. So the soft cap means that they've hit that, and then anything above that, any increases above that, we sort of cut them in half, so we're just slowing that process. But some players do go through that quite quickly because they still need an increase, they're still recording scores that are significantly higher, and then they hit the hard cap, which is basically like the glass ceiling. They can't go through it, they're going to be stuck there, and you'll find that players that are really declining will keep putting 105, 105, and they won't, the handicap index won't change. So a soft cap, look at a player. If they hit the hard cap, even if they've not had a handicap review, I would suggest looking at them. And the longer that they're in or they're stuck on the hard cap, the more likely is that they're going to need an increase to get them through that cap. And if you do have to increase anybody beyond the hard cap, tick the little box that says reset low index, because if you don't, they're going to be back on your hard cap report next week because they're going to hit it again. Any other questions?
I'm from Newport Golf Club, and through the winter we've always been social type golf, and sort of silverware's out the way. It's sort of non-qualifying for the battles and all this, that, and the other. Since World Handicapping Systems come in, the handicap committee seem pressurised to have a qualifying comp every
Well,
month.
there's no such thing as non-qualifying, which I mentioned before.
Exactly. So if you are qualifying, what's the minimum requirements? Because the other day we were lifting and placing in the rough, lifting and placing.
So straight away you can't do that. So you have to abide by the rules of golf.
Well, I actually questioned that at the golf club, and
yeah, so
said it was okay by Wales Golf, which
so if you're doing lift, clean and place,
yeah.
So if you're doing lift, clean and place, it's the general area, so that can be anywhere. If you're doing preferred lies, it's fairways only. Okay, so you can prefer your lie fairway, you can play off mats. The only thing really that says that you can't run a qualifier is if you're dropping it in the rough, if you're taking it from the fairway and dropping in the rough. So that means that you can't use it for handicap purposes because that's in breach of the rules of golf. But as long as the club have got the correct rule of golf, local rule in place, model local rule for lift, clean and replace, which means you can mark your ball, you can lift it up, you can clean it and you can return it to the place. That is available in the general area, so all of the golf course. So the rules, have a look, this is where the rules of golf and the rules of handicapping sort of like cross.
Slightly off piece.
It's all right.
Handicapping. What's your thoughts on handicap caps in competition?
So limits on entry.
Yeah.
Limits on entry or limits on.
For the competition, so let's say anyone can enter it off any handicap, but it might put down on the day it's limited to 20.
No. The rules of handicapping say that, again, within your terms of competition, if you want to do it, you can do it. It goes against the spirit of the system. What is a better way of doing it is having divisions. Just have 3 or 4 handicap divisions and allow players to play.
We have divisions, but at the end of the day, you can only have one winner, can't you? And the common belief, generalised,
yeah.
is that when WHS came in, the rule of thumb was the lower handicappers pretty much came down, the middle section stayed there, and the higher handicaps went up. That's the rule of thumb, so therefore they were, I'll probably say incorrectly, falsely inflated. Then the slope came in and they got even more again, and we were seeing a lot of silly scores.
But if you do convert that to we're 4 years further down the line, if handicap reviews have been done correctly, if players have been returning scores, everybody should now be correctly handicapped. So there shouldn't be any need for that. We still see people that say players are winning competitions with silly scores, and they try to attribute that to handicap allowances. We should have a different allowance. Why do we need 95%? Why don't we use something different? There's lots of things that play a part. But ultimately, even if you decided to go to a 75% allowance with handicap allowances, the winner of that competition would still win, irrelevant of what their handicap is, because they've played the best golf on the day. What I would say is divisions is the easiest way to do it, is to try and split people up into divisions and have a prize per division rather than one overall, unless it's like a major board prize or something. So if it's a major, what I would suggest is just say it's only available to players with a handicap index under 25, 29, whatever it is, and then put another competition on that day for those higher handicap players. Because by saying to somebody who's off 40, yes, you can come and play, but you can only play off 18. You're only going to get 18, a playing handicap of 18. They might as well not bother going out. They don't stand a chance. So you've actually gone, rather than trying to level the field to give the lower handicap players more chance, you've actually just gone, well, we're not going to change their chance against a middle field. We're just going to go. So you've got no chance now. So why would they bother playing?
I agree with that. So backtracking then, you said make it that only maybe 28 and below can win the trophy. Surely that's the same principle.
No, because you're not stopping people from entering the competition. So basically, you're saying that to enter the trophy competition, your term of competition says that you have to have a handicap index of 28 or better.
No, we let anyone play.
Yeah.
So
then we have the competition.
So this is what I'm saying. This is the alternative. So do that, and then anybody that meets that criteria of that's what their handicap index is can play off their handicap index and just play in that competition as if they were playing normally. Anybody that doesn't meet that, you've now got a Stableford competition for them. They're higher handicap players. They can still play on the day. They can still be involved. You're still getting the revenue as a golf club from having people on the golf course and people in the clubhouse afterwards. And they're just going to play for a different prize because they're playing for a Stableford prize and these guys are all playing for a medal prize.
But what's to stop those guys from saying you're still excluding me? Why can't I compete for the trophy?
They're the terms of competition.
Terms that you're going to set.
And you can set them.
Apparently, there is a cap, and I dare say most clubs do that.
But it's exactly the same. You're still saying to them, you can play, and you can play in this competition, but you're almost saying you're never going to be able to win it without actually saying it.
But that's the feeling from the low figures. You're never going to be able to win a ball comp because someone shoots 62 off 20.
So how many?
I'm off 4.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be able to shoot 62
Okay.
my goals because
You're
that's
not.
9 below.
You're not.
So it's pointless. So then it's pointless me entering, even with the divisions. So I've done the divisions, and I've had hell from high handicappers because there's only 30 low figures.
Yeah.
But then I've put 20 odd years in and been trying to get good.
Yeah. But
the
you.
system come in and now I'm being punished for being good. Yeah.
The system.
People want to be on the board. It's prestige things to board.
The system is not against you.
I promise you, every single figure feels like it is.
Feel like it is. I get that. I get that there's a feeling it is, but I tell you it's not. The statistics tell us it's not, because in order to sort of say to play, and it comes down to make up a field. If you have 10 low handicap players, yeah, in a field, but you then have 40 between, let's say, between 5 and 20. Okay, so that gives us 50 players.
Yeah.
And you've got 50 players between 20 and 54.
Yeah.
Right, so 50% of the field is a higher handicap player. Right? Statistically, one of those 50 is going to have a good round. Yeah?
No, I agree with
It
that.
doesn't
Just
matter
saying
what
it-
you do
it's
down
about,
here.
like, with the slope rating, like you have your handicap index.
But even
my
if...
brother, for example, is off 13.
Yeah.
I play the same course as him. We played it for years. I go up nothing, and he gets an extra 4 shots.
Yeah, because that
Right,
course
so-
statistically is harder for him than it is for you.
He'll shoot better than I will on net, consistently.
So his handicap's wrong.
It happens every week. Every week, 62, 60, 63.
So when you do your handicap review, what does that look like?
We would do it.
We'll do it, but it's still the same. It's happened for 2 years, and all I get is when they put the 20 scores in.
But then if he gets reduced down to, 7 or
Well,
whatever,
because
you
they
want,
then
which
just
is
spike
then
back
the
up
next
quite
year is
quick.
next score.
But
This
is-
is 62.
This is what I'm saying. If you start to look at the scores and and you do the handicap revision correctly, and it's all done, those players will get correctly handicapped, and it'll level itself out. But you have to have 20 scores in a record. Without 20 scores in somebody's record,
And
you
that's
can't-
a problem as well.
you can't
Because anyway,
predict.
It doesn't matter.
but it's a case of getting those 20 scores, and that could be over a 2-year period. It could be longer.
Can I ask a practical question, Steve, from that? Let's say the point of about players playing low, we get that quite a bit as well. The point I was making about the growth score is, I mean, there's lots of low handicap players that every week there's 20 guys that go in the gross. These middle players will never get near that, so you're playing for your own prize every week.
Well, it's big group prize anyway, because I've introduced the divisions anyway.
The question I was going to ask is, so for on in terms of competition, so we don't want to handicap limit them so much. Is it good practice to say, well, you need 3 or 5 competition rounds on your record for the following year? What's the best practice on that?
The best practice is that everything's treated exactly the same.
We
So
have 15 scores, well, competitions 15 scores within a 2-year period.
Yeah.
Makes you eligible to win a sport.
The reason I ask is one of the bugbears that we sometimes get back from membership is this person is either new to golf or improving. That's normal. But so how can they come into a competition and actually get better? They're winning on their 3rd, 4th, 5th competition round, whereas this person's got 20s and looking going, I play all year. What can I do?
yeah, go for a lesson.
I disagree. I'm just
But
saying,
yeah,
what things return to competition.
There is as soon as you get your handicap index, you are exactly the same as any other player with a handicap index. You have one. The only difference is yours might not yet have settled because you need to get those 20 scores in to start getting a settler, and maybe encourage those new players to put in more scores earlier. So whether they be 9-hole scores, whether they be general player scores, whatever it might be, encourage them to put those in sooner rather than necessarily going, well, the only option you've got is to play in competitions. Well, actually, maybe you should consider putting a few scores in before you start playing in competitions. Just reframing it rather than going, we're going to restrict your entry into competition, because it's not always fair. Because if I always use me as the example. I haven't played for 2 years. I came back to the game. I've technically only got 2 scores in my handicap record. So if that was the case, I can't play in anything because I've not got any scores in my record. I've not got any competition scores. I can't play in competitions because they're on a Wednesday and I'm at work. And there's many reasons why players can't always get competition scores in. So that's why we're really reluctant to say do anything with competition general player scores. No worries. I think the fact that there's always stood up means time over. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, and I'll be around, so feel free.